Since 1992, Genesis House has been helping real people heal from addiction on their private recovery campus in beautiful Palm Beach County, Florida. Their family-owned program is accredited by the Joint Commission and offers detox and dual diagnosis treatment in a comfortable and confidential setting. At Genesis House, they focus on treating the underlying causes of addiction. Their comprehensive approach includes psychiatric care, individual and small group therapy, trauma healing techniques, and holistic care including yoga, massage, and animal-assisted therapy. After treatment, their clients enjoy the lifelong support of a nationwide network of Genesis House alumni. Call Genesis House today at 1-800-737-0933 to speak with someone who understands. Visit them on the web at www.genesishouse.net. It's time to start your journey to a long and successful recovery.
Friends in Recovery, the Addiction Recovery Podcast, is brought to you by the Friends in Recovery community, a thriving network of individuals who are fighting back against the stigma of addiction. Join our hosts as they speak up about the real issues of addiction, treatment, and recovery. Friends in Recovery, the Addiction Recovery Podcast, is available on Facebook, Podbean, iTunes, and YouTube 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Now, here are your friends in recovery.
Hey guys, Jersey Ed here, and welcome to the Friends in Recovery Podcast. And I'm here with COVID today, and Skylar, Noontime with Sky, and Tiff, and our special guest, Jeff Zeizel. We'll get to him in a minute. But yes, I did say COVID, guys. My family is locked up in our house in Cape May with COVID, and it's not fun. But guys, I didn't get the bad COVID. I got the good COVID. I guess it's a new Abercrombie, whatever is it, Abercrombie and Finch fucking one I got. Yeah, that's the one I got. So right. I got just kind of a head cold here, but I'm going to power through it. And the reason why I came on today, I could have just laid down and kind of let these guys do it. The real reason I came on it because I wanted to see Jeff. That's why. But
I love you too, Ed.
but you know what? Even in my worst times, I probably would be thinking. Maybe I wouldn't be using feeling like this, but I would definitely be thinking, or when I'm going to get better, or take a little bit more Theraflu to go use. You know what I mean? So, and this brings me to the beginning reading of our Friends in Recovery meetings. It says, "Welcome to the Friends in Recovery virtual support meeting sponsored by Genesis House. We hope that this helps you stay on track in your recovery and combat feelings of isolation in these uncertain times. This is the part. Recovery always must come first, even if we're sick or can't leave the house." Mm-hmm. That's very important to me, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. But I just wanted to let everybody know I'm a little nasally because I do have the COVID and the whole family does. But we'll talk about that a little bit more. And when we bring Jeff in, we're going to take a clinical look at step one, because we are talking about step one this whole month. And if you missed our meeting on last Monday, this is something completely new, guys. You can go to our YouTube channel, Friends of Recovery Podcast. Just Google it on YouTube. You'll pull us up, and then you'll get Rich, the step guy, in the playlist. And he went over it in detail on our steps that we did, our step one on Monday. So if you want to get a detailed kind of look at the steps, go to our playlist on our YouTube channel, and you'll get you'll kind of see where we're at with all that. And I do have some kind of brain fog going on. It's like, God, I'm like trying to write my notes down, and I'm trying to like kind of get going here. But on that, I'm going to turn it over to Tiff to tell us all about our meetings that I was just talking about and where you can find them and all that good stuff.
All right. Thanks, Ed. Hi, guys. It's Tiffany P. Here in 20 below Minnesota. But I am warm and cozy in the house. And just like Ed said, recovery must always come first. And thank God for Zoom. Because when we are sick or can't leave the house, we can still go to meetings. And Friends in Recovery offers twice daily meetings. So 2 times a day, guys, at both noon and 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So here are the things that we have. We have speaker meetings. We have step meetings. We have living clean meetings. We have topic discussion, literature discussion, the big book study, which I am impartial to because that's my meeting, not my meeting, but it is on Sundays and I do lead it. It's not mine, it's yours. But big book study on Sunday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The Alumni and Friends, which is an awesome group of fellowship from both the alumni at Genesis House as well as Friends in Recovery Friends. That's at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Tuesday nights. And then we have our meditation group, our loved one groups, which is on Monday nights at 8 p.m. And we have adventure plannings and more. So see one of us, of course, by asking and commenting below in the YouTube, on YouTube or anywhere, and we can get more meeting lists out to you, or you can always find them at genesishouse.net under connections until we get our Friends in Recovery website going, which you will be able to click live meetings all the time and be able to get to somebody. So that's it. Back to you, Ed.
Thanks there, Tiff. And I think Scott is going to give us a quick little update on all of our social media stuff, how you can stay in touch with us and in tune with what's going on and all that.
Yeah, if you miss one of the meetings, if it's past 7 or one of the times of the Friends of Recovery meetings, you can get on our Facebook. We have social media. So the cool thing about that is we have a Friends of Recovery group. So you go to the Genesis House page, you like that page, and there's groups. There's a Friends of Recovery group. There is a Friends of Recovery Adventures group, and then there's an alumni group. All of them are private. So like it's really cool because we can all post stuff in there. I lost a friend when I was going through it. I posted in there how much I was struggling, and people were encouraging and were there for me. So if it's not time for a meeting and you can't find a meeting, I'm sure there's somebody on Facebook. Everybody's always on Facebook. So find us at Genesis House Facebook page, like our groups. And then we're also on Instagram, Podbean, iTunes. And then I think that's all we're on for the different platforms.
Yeah. You got
Instagram
and
and Facebook. Yeah.
Yep. And then I just wanted to real quick, if you guys are interested in doing some quick little service that goes a long way when you guys are in treatment, it's super awesome to get mail. And some people don't get mail because we burn all the bridges before we get there. So if you guys have time today, write a quick 5-minute card down and dear fellow recovering addict, and send it in the Genesis House. And we call it the Pen Friend program. We'll put the address in below, and you can send it in. And it's just a small act of service that goes a long way.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it's awesome. It's so
Nice.
cool, that Pen Friends group.
Yeah.
Tiff, you still send Pen Friends out to Genesis House, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Both Sky and I do. And I encourage people on many meetings, especially when we're talking about service in meetings and people have questions on how to do service now, especially with Zoom. We're not, clearing out ashtrays and making coffee anymore. So I always put out there the Pen Friends group because it's a great way for my recovery to write a quick note and get something off my chest, talk about my recovery, send it out. I feel good about it. And someone on the other end is receiving it. And I've gotten lots of shout outs and letters back from
me
people.
too. I wanted to cry when I got
it meant the world
to
so
me.
Cool.
When someone wrote me back, I was like, oh my gosh.
I recently wrote Ed a letter.
We don't want to go into that. That's for another show. Hey, we do have a rated explicit for this show, so you can talk whatever you want. So thanks, guys. And that's really important. And you can look at the notes for more of this information. We like to give you a lot of this information at the beginning of the show because it's really important to do this stuff, to get involved in this stuff. Like I said, I'm stuck in the house with COVID and I still have to worry about my recovery. I still have to maintain it. All these years later, it doesn't matter. I still have to maintain my recovery. And that's why I wanted Jeff on today, Jeff Zeizel, excuse me, to take a clinical look at step one. And, in my early recovery, I did a lot of outpatient. And if it wasn't for the clinical approach and the AA hand in hand, I don't think I'd be where I'm at today. It was really important. Now, I didn't do IOP or PHP. I did one-on-one 2 times a week with a group So I did really like 3 hours a week. It was a little different back then, but it was really important for me to sit down with my therapist to tell him my deep, dark secrets, because I couldn't even imagine telling another human being out there, like, a sponsor. I wasn't ready to tell a sponsor my deep, dark secrets. I knew I was safe in that confines of the office. And if you look at Jeff, all those degrees on the back there, it made me comfortable. It really did, that I could talk about things that I might not talk about, then get me ready for the real world, because my therapist wasn't my sponsor, but he really did get me ready for the next step, for the real world. And that's why I really wanted to talk about the clinical piece of step one. I just want to read this. It's called Inside Step One. It's from Hazelton and Nikki R on one of our meetings on Thursdays. They do Mental Health Thursdays. She had this article. So if you get a chance, look it up. I'm just going to read a quick verse from it. But Inside Step One by Hazelton, it was written by Jeff J. But step one doesn't say people are powerless. It doesn't say that they can't take charge of their lives, or they don't have the ability to change. Quite the opposite. What step one does is unlocks a great paradox. And I think that's what therapists can do. I think the therapist can have us understand that and see that there's a little bit more than just turning, just kind of giving up everything. And the therapist can guide us in that direction, saying, well, you don't have to be powerless over everything, and that's where the clinical piece, I think, for me, was so important. And that's why I want to bring Jeff in. And I know, Jeff, you have something, you probably prepared something, because I know you're very prepared, and probably some kind of screen thing going to go on here or whatever.
Well, the podcast is right now.
Oh, you thought this was just a get together? So
I thought it was just meeting Tiff.
But so that's my thought and perspectives on it. And I just want to bring you in, Jeff, so you can kind of give us that version of what you see on the other side.
Yeah. Thanks, Ed. So it really is a great subject to discuss. And I think what you have read from Hazelton, I always think of step one, what a paradox, because when you realize that you are powerless, you actually gain control and power over many aspects of your life, not everything. So, and I love the steps. I'm not a person in recovery. I don't have an addictive disorder, but I grew up in a family where my dad was alcoholic. So I remember growing up and just thinking he was crazy. Like, oh yeah, he drinks, but he's just crazy. And my mother would take my identical twin brother and I, force us to go to like an Alateen meeting. And interesting enough, so I'm a clinical social worker. My twin brother, Paul, he's a forensic psychologist. Probably not coincidental that we ended up in the helping professions, because you grew up in a dysfunctional family. It's so common. So, the number one profession that women who grow up in a dysfunctional family becomes is like nurses or teachers. They become helpers. Mm-hmm. Men, the data is a little skewed, but, my brother and I, here we are, we're in the mental health business. So it is remarkable how when you realize you have no control, you actually gain an element of control. And at the end of the day, though, when we really ask ourselves in our lives, and Ed, you had said some really great things about how the sanctity of the therapy office, you can really lay it all out. You can talk to people, and the most effective therapy is when you like the clinician. It doesn't matter what training they have, social worker, psychologist, psychiatrist, recovery coach, pastoral counselor, different schools of thought, Gestalt, Freudian, humanistic, analytic, Rogerian, experimental, etc. None of those things matter. There may be personal choices and you prefer a particular person. Like sometimes, as a clinician, I apply to get on these panels and they say, what's your approach? Are you a Christian counselor, et cetera? So, I would say clinical social worker with the interest in addiction, expertise in addiction. So, but the interesting thing is that it's the relationship. So you like the person, you're going to get better faster. You don't like the person, that actually is a problem. So those of you who are listening in and watching, ask yourself, do I have a good connection with this person? unfortunately, this time of COVID out there, it's really hard to get clinicians. So maybe the person who's not your ideal person, stay with them until you have an alternative, because you can say, hey, you're not listening to the podcast. I don't really like this person. I'm going to find someone else. And then guess what? You're not going to find anyone because it's really challenging. However, those things are also appropriate to discuss in treatment. Just like, I would say there's no really subjects that are off limits. We can talk about whatever we need to talk about. But the role of the therapist is sort of guide the person in recovery to help them, educate them, and help them understand and be non-judgmental and empathic. That's why step one is so great, because there's no judgment. It's like, and we know that people who are recovering from addictive disorders, they feel so bad already. So even like a funny look or a sarcastic comment or something can really be misinterpreted, or it's not sarcasm, but they think it's sarcasm. In fact, I often hold this up when I'm in treatment. Sarcasm, just one of the many services I offer. So, but it's interesting because I think you have a good relationship, you can open up, you can discuss these things. But at the end of the day, when we ask ourselves in our lives, what do we have control over? Very little, very, very little. And but we do have control over how we think and our attitudes and our decisions and how we're going to respond to things. So I may not have control over being stuck in traffic, but I have a control over my reaction to being stuck in traffic. Tiffany, you had said it's 20 degrees below zero in Minnesota. That's brutal. It's horrific. And many people would say, oh my God, I have no control of the weather. Of course you do not, but you have control over how to dress warmly. You have control over staying in a warm environment. You have control over, challenging yourself. So instead of thinking like, oh, this is horrific, it actually, one of the reasons why people like to live in cold weather, because many people can't. You feel special, like I'm a little tougher than the next guy. It's how you look at it. Would you rather have being on this podcast, Tiffany, would you rather have it being like 25 degrees, big deal, or 20 below? Of course, 20 below. It's like a tipping point. Like not everyone can deal with this.
Yeah.
Special people live in Minnesota. Special people work their recovery. Like it's a badge of honor. So, there are many things in life that we may be ashamed of and we don't talk about it. But when someone's in recovery, they're so proud. When you're using, you're ashamed. When you're in recovery, you're proud. So you have a choice of like,
Jeff. I'm sorry. Yeah. You're bringing up shame a lot. And that is one, that's a big part. Step one, we didn't even read step one. Step one, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives have become unmanageable. That brings up a lot of guilt, shame, and remorse, and especially with our thinking. You said, we can't control our thinking, but that guilt, shame, and remorse comes in because, oh my God, I did all these bad things. I stole my family's money. I did things I shouldn't have done. I went to places I shouldn't be. What does that look like as far as trying to get over that? And how in step one can we know that we're powerless over it, but also be empowered by that?
So that's a great question. So we know that, one of the sort of the pathologies, shall we say, that goes with being a person who abuses substances, you end up doing some behaviors you're not proud of. It's part of the disease. So I always remind people, don't judge that person. They can't help themselves. It's sort of like someone who has a seizure disorder. It's not their fault. Someone has a brain injury. It's not their fault. So, but sometimes we don't know that. So, someone who is using and struggling, you got to peel it back a little. What gets them to that point? Why are they using? So they're using because they're in pain. So we know that 70 to probably 75% of people who get addicted to substances have an underlying problem with depression and or anxiety. And they use to self-medicate because it makes them feel better. So who can blame anyone for wanting to feel better? The difficulty is that the act of trying to feel better causes a host of other problems. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, but it does create a whole range of problems because it's a slippery slope. So then they start feeling bad, they start lying, they start having unhealthy behaviors, and subsequently there's all this shame, and now they're really struggling. And then of course there's the psychological element of just feeling so down and depressed. You can't think of how you can get out of it.
Yeah.
That's why families have to be so supportive and helpful, and also not enable. Like, we love you, we care about you, we want you to get well,
Mhm.
and we can understand the disease, but we need you to participate in getting well.
Mhm.
And the families can only do so much, because at the end of the day, the person has to embrace it. The person has to be willing to let go. So a lot of times they need to be educated, because they don't know what they don't know. So that's why, like, Friends in Recovery, and someone who like is out there listening to this can bring a friend. Hey, just listen to these people. They've all been there. They get it.
Mm.
They understand.
Yeah.
They're not judging you, because they don't want to be judged either. And they've been in pain.
Mhm.
So the
Yeah.
people have the most empathy, the people who've been on that side as well. One of the reasons I like working with addicted people, first of all, they're so much fun, number one. And and number two, there's a pretty clear path of what you have to do to get well. I mean, like, in the many arenas of mental health, the path is not so clear. There are many things you can do. And also, that was my father. He got well. He went to AA, and he would ask me to go to meetings sometimes, because he was getting a chip, or when he had 30 years. I was like, I was proud to be there. I was proud of him. I thought it was great.
Yeah.
And they were really cool people. They're really interesting people. So so we know that shame is the baggage they live with, but they need to forgive themselves. So they have to be able to move on and forgive themselves. And it's important that they forgive themselves.
Mhm.
Ideally, it'd be great if others forgive them, but as we talk about control, we do not have control over whether other people
Mhm.
will forgive us.
Sure.
We only have control of our own behavior and our actions and our words. So we can ask for forgiveness, we can make amends, but the shame is so high. And I think that step one sort of takes the heat off a little. I remember talking to my father in early recovery. I said, do you feel guilty about the things you've done? Because it wasn't easy.
No.
And I was actually really looking for an apology. But he said, no, it's a disease. Oh, geez. I probably should have been more straightforward than I think. So,
Just apologize, Dad.
But I like that you said that. I like that you said that it's all part of the disease. I didn't understand that when I was at step one. I didn't understand, I had a lot of fears. I like that you said that when looking for a therapist, it's key to have the right person. Because the first therapist I had was not the right person. It actually took me backwards. It did. And so I didn't know so I hope that people are listening to this, like you said. I didn't know that I had the power of choice. Like you said, I do have some power of choice over who I'm going to meet with, right?
Mhm.
And finding the right person. And I have the ability to look for somebody different. And I did look for someone different after someone told me that you can fire your therapist, and the therapist actually told me that, and when I found the right person, I opened up a whole can of whoop ass. And I'm really fun, right? Because I have complex PTSD. I still do, right? But in early recovery, I had that right person. I was able to find that right person to start sharing things with. She taught me that the things were part of the disease, that guilt and shame and those things that I was doing were all part of the disease. And
Yeah.
it helped me open up, because it made me feel like she understood me, and it made me feel a lot less fearful. I still was afraid, but she made me feel better. So thanks for bringing that up, Jeff.
And you also took a risk. You were willing to put yourself out there. That's hard to do. But in life, when you take risks, there's a reward. So I have 3 sons, and they're wonderful young men and great people. And I try to educate them, and they're very enlightened. And one time I said to them, there's a foolproof way never to get turned down by trying to ask the most beautiful girl in the room. Really, Dad? What's that foolproof way? Don't ask her out. So you'll never get turned down. So you have to take a chance. You have to be willing to put yourself out there, and you also have to understand that sometimes it doesn't always go your way. So, I know Ed does some life coaching, and there was a book, I forgot the name of it, but it was something about how adversity is a gift.
Mm-hmm.
That when you suffer and you have pain, and I'm sorry you have complex PTSD, but sometimes there's some takeaways that make us better people.
Yes. And I know that now because I've learned that, right? She taught me that, and it has made me a better person. And I'm glad that she gave me that takeaway. Because I do think that, like you said, adversity gives us a lot of things in our life that we wouldn't have had before. I've learned through her that yes, I know that AA for me is not a cure, but for my mental illness, it's not a cure. But together with a therapist, it is definitely what I need. It's definitely what I need. And it has just really catapulted me, my personal growth into the next level. It's just been crazy, the growth, the combination of the two, having that clear-cut path and a therapist.
It also sounds like
Jeff, go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead, Ed.
No, I just want to
Well, I
quote
was just going to say
something.
that Tiffany's worked really hard to get there, so it doesn't happen without hard work.
No.
We all important things in life take time, and they're hard. So how is it that some people feel good about themselves? Because they work hard. Do you feel good about like taking the trash out on trash night? Not really. Do you feel good about like training for the marathon, Ed, that you run, or working in recovery, or going back to school, or writing a book, or whatever those challenges are? The harder the task, the bigger the payoff, the sweeter the reward. And I would say in life, give me hard any day. I'd rather have hard things. I don't want easy things.
Yeah, but the reward is so great once you get to the other side, like our recovery. Like, I remember sitting in a room hearing somebody say, I got a year. I'm like, holy shit, I can't even get through a day, let alone a year. Then I got a year. I'm like, oh my God, this guy has 5 years. Now I got 5 years. Oh my God, this guy has 10 years. So it just keeps that risk and reward keeps pushing us over, further and further. And like you said, training for the marathon. Do I want to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, throw running shoes on and figure out what to wear and in a cold, in a warm, whatever it is, and do all this before my day starts? No. But when it comes to race day and I'm standing on that start line and I know I can finish the 26.2 miles, I look back and I say, it was all worth it. Same thing with recovery. One thing, Jeff, you always say, and I'm just going to bring us back a little bit, fall down 7, get up 8. And that's what Tiffany was talking about. It's okay not to, and believe it or not, that's a biblical term. I don't know if you guys know that or not. That's a biblical term. If I'm wrong, comment below, let us know. And if you guys agree with some of this stuff, please comment below and let us know. And also you can email us at help@friendsandrecoverypodcast.com and send us an email about it, whatever. But fall down 7, get up 8.
Therapist, though, it's so huge, though, because you guys are talking about taking a risk, but I've had therapists use empowerment to help me get to that risk, because I trusted my therapist more than I trusted a sponsor at first, I guess, because the whole HIPAA thing and, I'm paying to be there, whatever it may be. I felt like a trust there. And then my therapist kept saying, well, Skylar, you got to open up to them so they can help you. And before I knew it, it was helping me. I was struggling with a lot of like, and the trash, I would pay off taking that off, because I know taking it out, because I know that there's been times in depression I've sat there and not let the trash go out for 2 weeks. That payoff's great when I'm coming out of a depression.
When you're depressed, getting dressed is hard.
Yes, it really is, washing everything. So, like you said, but the risk, I was struggling with toxic relationships, and my therapist kept saying, go to SLAA. And I'm like, Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous. I'm not like, I'm thinking I'm going to go there and they're going to be talking about anal. I'm just going to be honest. That's what I thought.
Yes.
And I went there and it was a bunch of women that had like love issues. And I'm like, and I fit right in. And like, I was like, wow, but it took me 6 months for him to encourage me to do that. And then I finally called my cousin that had been to him before and asked her to go with me. Like, so it really started something that I didn't see in the beginning. And it took time, 6 months of every week going there for him to have to recommend it. You know what I mean? Like, so it's super important, I think, that like we have therapists, because the empowerment they gave me personally,
one of the interesting things is that if we think about step 1, it's really about coming to terms with where you're at. Like, I am powerless. I can't do this anymore. It gives you permission. It's such a powerful, paradoxical thing, because the ability to say, I can't do it, then opens up other things that you can do. So, because if we say you're powerless over everything, well, then I'm powerless over my recovery. No, you are actually empowered in recovery. You're powerless over the illness. So you want to get well, you hang on to the things you have control of. And it may be very little. It may be I just have to go to a meeting. Maybe that's the only control I have. Maybe it's I go to a podcast, listen to the podcast. Maybe it's I hang out with positive people. I go to, church, or I opt to go into treatment or speak to a clinician. There are many things we have no control over, but, conversely, there are some things we do. I would say the world is full of things I have zero control, but there are some things I have control over. I can choose what I'm going to wear today.
Right.
Actually, I was looking for a different shirt. It was in the wash, so forget that.
I was looking for the shirt that I had on. So
Yeah, but there are some things. Ed, that's a nice shirt, by the way.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks. In this article, Inside Step One by Jeff J, it also, and Jeff, this ties into what you're saying. We're powerless over the effect of the chemical or the behavior it has on us. We're not going to get a good drinking or drugging. We're not going to get more rational about it. We're going to get better we're not going to get better at controlling it. We've tried 100 different times to control it. So basically, we can't control our drinking and drugging. That's what step one is telling us. And what Jeff, you're saying it says earlier in the article that we admit we're powerless over alcohol. It doesn't say we're powerless over our choices or over our lives or over our relationships with other people. It says we're powerless over alcohol, and that limiting phrase that tightens the focus on the drug, and it's critical. So that's a lot of things that people don't understand. Like, okay, so when I come in, I think we talked about this last week on the show. When I come into the rooms, I just got to be powerless over everything. I have to lay down like a dog and just give up. That's not true.
No, not
That's
at all.
not true.
I heard a phrase from a speaker the other day that said, if you have to control it, you are out of control. If you have to control it, then you're out of control.
So true.
And that really resonated with me, because that's where I was at. I had that all or nothing thinking, like, oh, I got to control it, everything, and my whole life was out of control. My alcoholism, my drug addictions were out of control. But I love, like you said, because that word powerless was really hard for me to get over. Really hard for me, because I kept thinking powerless, right? Like you said, Ed, like lay down like a dog, right? Yeah. But working with the therapist, working with the sponsor, going to meetings, learning that, like you said, Jeff, I get to take charge of my life, right? The promises say, that I'm going to gain so many things, through letting go of drugs and alcohol, but I can gain control of many aspects of my life, like my attitudes, my reactions. That comes from the don't be a dick. That's what we were talking about last week. Don't be a dick. I have the power to control my attitude, my reaction to the traffic, things like that. Therapist was key.
Yeah. If we look at step one, it says we're powerless over alcohol and that our lives have become unmanageable. So we have to admit that we're powerless over alcohol. If you're going to admit that you're powerless over alcohol, you're not powerless over your whole life. Think about it. I have to physically admit that I'm powerless over alcohol. So I'm not completely giving up my control. But I think in the big book somewhere it says the process of admission, we have a psychological change. So in that, right, in that admitting, something happens, and Jeff, maybe you can explain it in that admitting that we're powerless over alcohol, powerless over the drug, powerless over sex, gambling, whatever it is. What is that change that we get, that psychological change?
So I mean, it's such a powerful concept, because what we're really saying is that the things that we do when we take this drug and this substance, alcohol, other drugs, etc., it controls us. We lose the ability to control ourselves. But if we don't take these substances, we empower ourselves to then have a type of control over other things. And it sort of takes you off the hook. It's like, I don't have to worry so much. I just have to live my life. So we know, for example, that addiction is a brain disorder. It controls how you function, how you think, all these things you do. And we also know that if a person with an obsessive compulsive disorder is constantly thinking of this particular behavior, let's just say hand washing, and they're constantly concerned about germs and so on, and they always want to wash their hands, there were some studies done that if you can actually get the person to shut that concept off, shut those thoughts off for 90 seconds, it actually goes away. And
Wow.
that's the same thing we're saying in step one. Coming to terms with the fact that I'm powerless over it, it actually takes it off the table. I don't have to worry about it. And you can say, well, if it happens, I guess it happens. When I see patients, a lot of therapy and recovery is like philosophy of life. I look at the steps as a philosophy of life, and I think they're fantastic, even though, they're really aligned with people in recovery. They're useful for every aspect, and I tell people, you should read the steps. I'm not an alcoholic. I know. Read them anyway. They're really fantastic.
Mhm.
And, for example, we don't have to get into all the other steps, but, you're not going to tell someone the truth if it's going to hurt them and there's no upside, so,
Right.
so there's so many things we can do. And we also know that the onus of control of our choices we make helps us move forward. So, I was sometimes laugh. I'll see people who will, like with COVID, we blame COVID on everything. Oh, I forgot to, book the appointment with my dentist. Oh, it's COVID. Ed's wearing a bathrobe, really
That's
not a
getting
shirt.
true.
It's COVID. By the way, Ed, that really looks like a bathrobe. So
I'm really in a bathrobe. Yes.
just blame COVID, Ed. So
I'm in my bathrobe. I've got COVID. I'm sick.
There's a group that's called Boozers in Bathrobes, and they wear their bathrobes
It's
every morning
perfect.
on the meeting.
Perfect.
Boozers
Did you
in
have a
bathrobe.
cigarette hanging out the lip? The interesting thing, though, as we talk about taking responsibility, sometimes I laugh because someone will come in like, well, that's my disease talk. I said, not exactly. You're hiding behind your disease. That's manipulation. Own your disease, own your recovery. They converge, they separate, sometimes they come back. Stay in your lane, follow the program. That's why I like working with, recovery people, because follow the steps, you're going to get better. And with therapy and people who understand it and non-judgmental and maybe some medication when appropriate, it really helps. We know that people who, for example, who are depressed and have talk therapy and medication, 80% of them get better right out of the gate. So, and it's a beautiful thing. So, we know that life is hard. So part of my job, I believe, is to educate them about all sorts of things. And we talk about how life is full of so many things we have no control over, but we have control over our reaction. The other thing I love about, the steps in recovery is that it's all about keeping it in the day, 24 hours a day, keeping in the moment. Today's the only day that counts. So I talk often with some of my patients about philosophy. I talk about Stoicism. So who are the Stoics? And I can go off on a rail here, but I'll keep it brief. So the Stoics, they lived 2,000 years ago. They were the ancient Romans and Greeks. The most famous Stoic, Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor, 2,000 years ago. The Stoics have 4 underlying principles: wisdom, courage, virtue, and temperance. Those are all in the steps. So, have wisdom, learn, be courageous, show up to a meeting, have temperance. The bumper sticker, easy does it. That's temperance. Let it go. Virtuous, be honest, be truthful. I mean, those are all the steps. But they also say the only day that counts is now.
Yeah.
The only day we're alive is today. This moment, with all 4 of us on this podcast, we are sharing this experience right now. It's the only thing that counts. Yesterday is dead. Tomorrow does not exist. It's about today. So maybe I used all sorts of drugs and substances yesterday. It doesn't matter. It's dead. Today's day 1. Here's my chip, my reward, my 24-hour chip. What a fantastic, influencer, because we can then feel good about ourselves. It's all about changing your mindset and your mood and finding things that you can feel good about. I can't be, I have to surrender and my life's unmanageable. But this part is manageable. I can do this. What do they always say? Just keep coming. Just show up. And then there's like-minded people who love you. They embrace you. They don't even know you, but they embrace you.
Yeah, you go into a meeting. Go into a meeting. Everybody loves themselves. You. Yeah. It's funny you say, a reward. And I'm sure our listeners can identify with this, and Tiff and Skylar, you can too. what was it like when you picked up your 24-hour chip? It was a fucking plastic poker chip, right? And it was the best thing in the world that you could pick up. It was like getting a bar of gold when you got that white chip, you know, and then you got your 30 and then your, you know, whatever. And it's a reward system that makes us feel good and keeps, you know, kind of gets us our lives manageable. Jeff, I want to talk about the second part of the step. And girls, ladies, I don't know how you want me to call you, but please step in because unmanageability, this is a big part of the second step, because the unmanageability part is to some people, and I'm sure, Jeff, you work some higher end clientele, some, you know, whatever, middle class, whatever, you work with the whole spectrum of clientele. The higher end clientele, or even just the people who are more successful, well, my job is going good. My life is going good. You know, everything, you know, I'm making 6 figures and I drive around this very fancy car and I have a beautiful house. That they can't see their life unmanageable. But how's the relationship with your wife, with your kids? Do you scream at the guy when he doesn't have your coffee ready in time? You know, if he forgets to put cheese on your sandwich, or you're kicking the fucking door in, you know, walking out the door, you know, that's an unmanageable part. What's your take on unmanageability, on unmanageable?
It's a great question, because when things are manageable, we don't really see the problem. And quite frankly, if you're managing, maybe it's not a problem. But when it becomes unmanageable, then, you know, we're sort of tipping it's a tipping point changes. And I think unmanageability is sometimes an internal process. You know, you can have all the trappings of wealth and success and fame, but if you feel terrible about yourself, that, you know, people would trade that off in a heartbeat. So, you know, we forget that there are certain things in life you can't buy. You can't buy self-worth. You can't buy confidence. You can't buy personal satisfaction. And what's the expression? You can't buy happiness.
Yeah.
So that takes hard work. And we were just talking earlier about, like, you know, how do you the harder things, usually there's a bigger reward. So, but everything's relative. So for the person who can't get dressed, getting dressed and taking the trash to the curb, that's a minimal success. And then you build upon that. You know, when I see patients, I'm sort of old school in a lot of ways. I always tell them, make your bed every day. That's a minimal success. And if you had a terrible day, you come home, at least you have a nicely made bed.
There's a book called Make Your Bed.
Small
Yeah.
victories.
That's right. Admiral William McCraven, Lessons Learned by Navy SEAL.
Yes, that's it.
Well,
That's
and
it.
they start with that in treatment.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Bed every single day.
Yeah.
And then you have rituals and you have rules. So, for example, your life's unmanageable. You don't eat properly. Where'd I leave my car? The house is a mess. There's no routine. There's no time frame. There's no nothing. When people start getting their lives more manageable, what do? They set the alarm. They get at the same time every day, even if they don't have to go to work. They start exercising. They start taking pride in themselves. Yeah. They make sure they're out of the house at a certain time. And, you know, we were talking earlier about how, like, the 24-hour chip is a reward system. So we could go to meetings and be rewarded that way by developing healthy relationships, or we can try to get our brains to get the reward in unhealthy ways, the drugs, the substances, wasting time playing, you know, video games and social media is a blessing and a curse. So many people are addicted to it because every time someone likes something you put, you get a little chemical blip in your brain. You know, the small levels of endorphins and dopamine gives you pleasure, which is why so many young kids, particularly, you know, teenage girls and boys, feel so upset about things because, you know, they get bullied and so on. But, you know, when we think about how things are unmanageable, that's where you start having routines and you start having, practicing healthy behaviors. So one of my comments I often say to patients, I'll say, listen, you want to get well, you're going to have to do it. I said, I'll get you there, but you got to do the work. So they say, well, what do you mean? So I say, here's what I mean. You can't hire someone to do push-ups for you. You know, I can show you how to do them, and I can show you form, and I can ask you to do them. But at the end of the day, you got to do them.
Yeah.
And, you know, but if you are motivated, there's no reason why you can't succeed. Because I truly believe that we are capable of amazing things. You know, we only use like 11% of our brains. You know, we have so much more capability. So if you really want to get well, you can do everything. And, you know, just follow the program, follow the steps, get a sponsor, and also rely upon your gut feeling, and then have balance in your life. I mean, there's a whole range of things. But when things are unmanageable, that's when you get exhausted just trying to like function. And if you start saying like, I'm burnt out all the time because I have all these lies and I'm manipulating and I feel terrible, you got to come to terms with that. At a certain point in time, you got to come to terms with that. Now, some people don't,
when you talked about the unmanageability part, there was years of my life where, I mean, I was making, 6-figure income, and my life was definitely unmanageable now that I look back at it, because I still was managing my disease, meaning I was constantly looking for drugs and alcohol. It controlled every facet of my life. I was very impulsive with my money. I wasn't paying my bills, even though I had money. I was doing all sorts of I was canceling appointments. I was not showing up on time. I didn't set the alarm like you talked about, Jeff. There were so many things that led for me to that. I've had that idea in my mind that I couldn't be an alcoholic or an addict because I still had the money, the car, the house. I was, a single mom doing these things, but my life was definitely unmanageable now that I look back at it, and then I lost all those things. I lost them all. I ended up losing them all anyway. So definitely my life was unmanageable, even though on the outside it looked like it was not. I was definitely in a state of crisis.
And then sometimes we have to hit bottom for us to come to terms with that. That's the wake up call. Oh my God, look what has happened. I lost these things, the relationships, the DUI, the job, etc. And then we have to, face it. So sometimes, of course, we don't want people to hit bottom all the time because that could be death, but we want to raise the bottom.
Yeah, raise the bottom. That's a big deal. Like that's what shows like this are for, is to raise that bottom for other people so they don't get to the point that we were at.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And with the unmanageability too, I believe the NA literature talks about how it's like there's two different kinds. I mean, like there's the external, which unmanageability, like you said, losing things, but there's the internal one too. And if you didn't lose anything, that's okay. Cause like, I've run into clients and alumni where they haven't lost things and stuff, but how they feel about themselves is so bad, and how they think, like how they treat people. So those things matter too. So, I mean, like, I think you're right, Tiff, like when we don't lose everything and it looks manageable on the outside, that external, it doesn't discount the inside, that unmanageable we feel inside, and that's so important because some mental illness, like for me, that was huge. That was a huge piece I had to add in there.
Yeah.
Well, let's take some of these movie stars, for example, River Phoenix, Robin Williams, who else?
Anthony
all
Bourdain,
these guys, right?
Think of people with wealth and fame, and they had everything, and they took their lives, or they ended up dying of drugs. Anthony Bourdain, Kate Spade, Robin Williams, just recently, the last couple of years, and they were all amazing people, with remarkable talent, and they were just unhappy. The money didn't make any difference. The fame didn't make any difference. Their success, they were unhappy. You can't buy that. So one of the things we also know is that people who are truly happy are people who are satisfied with what they have. So, if you look at the Forbes 500 wealthiest people in the world, the guy who's number 24, he's not happy because he wants to be number 20. The guy who's 5, the billionaires, he's not happy. He wants to be number 2. The guy who's 2 is not happy. He wants to be number 1. They have more than they can ever imagine having, and they're not happy. It's the paradox, like step 1. So if I'm happy with what I have, I'm happy. I can never lose. If I live modestly and I live within my means and I'm happy with everything I have, money will not make me happy because I'm satisfied. And what's the best type of satisfaction? Internal. Here. That's the best. You can't buy that stuff. No one lies on their deathbed saying, I'm so happy I bought those boots on sale.
Well, you might, Jeff.
I know. I love bargain shopping.
Real quick, guys. Step in this article, and there's a lot of good things in this article. I'm gonna give it to you guys again. Inside Step 1 by Jeff J. It's from Hazelton, Hazelton Betty Ford. You can find it on their website. But it says step 1, and this kind of ties into what we were just talking about. Step 1 is a key that unlocks our jail cells. Right. If we admit we're powerless over alcohol in our lives and become unmanageable, we don't want to take our lives anymore. We don't want to drink and drug. We don't want to isolate. We don't want to be that person who we never intended to be. You know, we can get out of that jail cell and be who we want. That's if we admit that we're powerless over alcohol and our lives become unmanageable. Got another question here for you, Jess. I know we're going on, but this is a good show. If we want to, this is I guess the solution to step one, or the help part of step one. If we want to get better, we have to get honest.
Yes.
What's everybody's thoughts on that? What's Jeff, for the clinical side of that?
So, honesty, sometimes it's hard to be honest to yourself. So, because you're honest, you end up having to come to terms with this, and this stuff feels bad. It's painful, but you have to embrace that, because to grow more exponentially, you got to do the painful things. So, I go to the gym once a month. It's easy, no payoff. I go to the gym 5 or 6 times a week. It's hard, payoff. You want to get well, you got to do the work. And that's the part where you have a choice. So when we say that, I'm powerless over some of these things, but I'm not powerless over getting well. So I always tell people, this is highly treatable. This is highly treatable, and you can learn from this experience. And being honest and having painful things in your life can be really, take your energy away and be sort of knock the wind out of your sails. But it's a gift. It's a gift, because if you can deal with your suffering, you can grow. And one of the things I always say is that the people who get blindsided in life are the ones who think that life is easy. If you think life is hard, something bad happens, you really don't get so disappointed. So someone once said, like, what's the best meal I ever had? And everyone's naming fancy restaurants. This place in New York City, places downtown Boston. I said?
Abe and Louie's?
It's not a bad place.
It's not a bad place.
I said the best meal I ever had. I was 21 years old. I was stuck on a train going from Istanbul to Venice. I didn't eat in 2 days. Someone gave me a sandwich, cheese.
Wow.
That was the best meal I ever had, because I had deprivation. It was the best meal.
Yeah.
So everything becomes relative. So when we think about, dealing with painful things, it's, we have to forgive ourselves too. And there's always, I would say, one of my mantras, it could be worse. So I feel bad about something. Believe me, there's someone who probably feels worse. Someone who, was in a car accident and their infant got killed, and I feel bad because I got fired from a job. I don't know. That guy, I think, has it much worse. So it gives you perspective on things. Yeah. So there was a great quote from James Stockdale, who was a admiral in the Navy, got shot down over Vietnam, spent 7 years in the Hanoi Hilton, POW. And he said, I never have a bad day when I'm in a room with the doorknob. So,
right.
Like wow.
So,
that's so true.
And we complain, I'm stuck in traffic. This guy was 7 years in a Vietnamese POW camp, chained for 2 years, tortured every day. That guy's a hero. And I'm complaining because my latte is not hot enough.
I know. Yeah, it's true.
So,
it's true.
Getting honest for me, Ed, was such a healing moment. Like I said, I had a real, last week we talked about this. I was ashamed. I was humiliated. We talked about that word a lot, humiliated. But when I said out loud to someone else or got honest because I knew this internally, but I had to say and admit that I was a piece of shit mother and I couldn't stand myself. And when I said that and released that, it was such a big deal. I had to get honest about that stuff, and I didn't want to be that anymore. And getting honest and accepting that pain and the things that I had done really helped my surrender, and honesty was the key to doing that. And it was something I already knew. It wasn't a secret, it may not have looked like it, but I knew that I was, and I had to admit that. And getting honest about that really helped.
That took so much courage, Tiffany, and the ability to say that. You know what happened? You became a better mother that moment. The moment you said that,
I could sleep better. I could sleep better just by saying that out loud.
Yeah.
There's something magical. There was something magical about expressing, these painful things that
Yes.
hurt, the things you're ashamed of, the things that, that are bad that we've done. And we say, there's something magical when you say it, you get it off your chest, you get it
Mhm.
out. It's
Yeah.
so like rewarding.
Yeah. Yeah. Sky, what's your thoughts on getting honest?
Well, so I'm a visual learner. I always envision things, and the way I look about addiction, I think it's like somewhere's dark. Like I'm sitting there, fetal position, knees to my chest, like rocking, like waiting. Like that's addiction to me. And when I get honest, and when I share about where I'm at or what I'm feeling, it's like poking little beams of light in. And the more honest I get, the brighter it gets. The brighter it gets, the
Yes.
more it conquers that darkness. Because for me, that's what addiction is. It's fucking dark.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
and it's lonely and it's scary. And then I get honest, and I always think, well, why did I lie in the first place? Well, I learned growing up, like in kindergarten, when I cheated on a test, already in kindergarten, yes. Because I was scared to get in trouble. That's why, because I didn't study. So I
Yeah.
lied, they're scared to get in trouble. And then
Yeah.
because we're taught, like we have to lie to cover it. But this is something we actually can be honest about and get better. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And I
Yes.
always think about the honesty too. Like I say this all the time. Like you can't walk in the forest 3 miles and only walk 2 out. Like you just have
Yeah.
to do the work. Like you
Yeah.
have to, you know what I mean? Like put something into this. And
Yeah.
you get in what you put out. They was, meetings are terrible. Like you just get high there, meet connects. Yeah, if that's what you're going to look for. I mean, if you're going there to
Yeah.
have sex with somebody, you can do
Yeah.
that too. If you're going there to get recovery, you can get recovery too.
Yep.
It's like whatever you put in, you can get out. And
Yeah.
I think that in recovery, I've really learned about honesty and how it isn't a bad thing, and how, like I can be honest. And even when it's wrong,
Yeah.
Ed, I really messed up. I should have called you yesterday and I didn't. I'm sorry. Like I can own that. I can be honest that I was wrong. And like, then he actually trusts me more because of it.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
like,
It goes
you know,
away.
I don't know if you ever
Yeah.
did this, but just by saying, I would lie saying I was at Walmart when I really was at Target.
just
Mm.
because,
Why?
Yeah.
just
What
because.
is the
Yeah.
difference?
Yeah.
That was my impulse to lie.
Mhm.
You get so
But getting
conditioned.
honest is real
Yeah.
healthy.
Yeah.
There are some people who have a white lie, so they get a little pass on that. So someone once said to me, what's a white lie? So Ed, when I said so good to see you,
It was really amazing to see me, but you kind of keep
Some things
it.
are just
Right,
social
exactly.
norms. Some things are just social norms and we're taught it.
Yeah. Yeah. Guys, the end of this article, again, the article is Inside Step One through Hazelton by Jeff J. This sums everything up, guys, and we'll get a quick go around and then we can finish this up. The flip side of the coin we call acceptance is something called surrender. We have to stop fighting the battle. There is a way to beat this thing, but paradoxically, it is not by fighting it head on. Right? How true is that?
yeah,
Like,
very true.
all we have to do is just surrender. We don't have to go head to head battle. We don't have to punch it out. We don't have to grab somebody, put them in a headlock or take them down, or, show them I have more money or I have a better car or I have a better whatever it is, a better husband. It's just that we have to surrender. And once we surrender to win. And that's what step one is about. You guys listened to that last week. It ties in, kind of step one is surrender to win. And he put this so perfectly.
It's the paradox. The ability to sort of let go, you gain ability
You
to
do.
take control of other things. That's the paradox. And if you're not, some of us tend to be competitive persons. That's me. I'm always trying to be competitive with myself, better myself. Run faster, run longer, et cetera, et cetera. But if you don't compete in some arenas, you always win, because you have to decide what's the prize. The prize is self-worth. I don't have to be better than that guy. I got to be the best person I can be.
Yeah.
So, it's really about picking your spots. There are times that you can behave a particular way. It's appropriate. Other times you can't, but I think it's what that comment, the statement was so apropos, because the ability to sort of grow is about bettering yourself and surrendering and being honest. And then you have the ability to sort of you can embrace everything, because you're not living this life. We were talking earlier about dishonesty and versus honesty. For every lie you tell, you have to tell 16 other lies. So
Right.
there's research about this.
Wow.
If you just say, hey, I screwed up, I'm sorry, it's done.
Mhm.
And you let go. They can forgive you or they
Mhm.
cannot forgive you.
Mhm.
You have no control over that. But that's surrendering.
Mm. And I want to make a point about that. If you see anybody in the news and this, think about this, some of the scandals in baseball, what's his name?
Yeah, Bill
I don't know,
Clinton.
whatever. Yeah, Bill Clinton.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bill
Cover up is
Clinton.
always worse.
Yeah. So if you think about it, if he just said, "Yeah, I did it," it would all go away. Yeah, I did it, because there would be nothing to report on. They wouldn't try to catch him in lies. They wouldn't, be interviewing the girl, this one,
On to the
that
next.
one. Yeah, it just stops right there. So if you just admit and you just say that, you surrender, you're done. There's no more lying to be done. You don't have to keep going. Like you said, the 16 lies that come after, because you have to cover up your lies for your lies,
So Bill Clinton lost his law license, not because of the Monica Lewinsky affair. It's because he lied. That's why he lost.
Right.
Yeah. Wow. Just 'cause
Brene
of-
Brown talks about that, like a moment of uncomfortability can save so much resentment. Like, you know what I mean? So it's just like that moment of uncomfortability. We just get through that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Jeff, I wanted to ask you real quick before we end. When you're with clients clinically, right? Like, what's the best way you help them like see that paradox? Like, is there something you
question.
say, a method or anything, that works best to do that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, I tell stories sometimes, and I'll tell different stories. I say, "Oh, let me tell you a story about somebody." And sometimes they're like people I know. Sometimes they're about Ed. So I know this guy who wears a bathrobe on a podcast. What about him? But what, but I talk to them about how, it's really important to be able to like be willing to feel pain, that you got to embrace it. Life is hard. And I tell them, practice hard things. Don't practice easy things. Practice hard things. And the ability to practice hard things allows you, each day you get better. So, I tell stories. So one of the stories, my 26-year-old son, Austin, who sort of, I would say the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. So he says to me, "Dad, New Year's Eve day is coming up. Let's go to South Boston. Let's jump in the ocean. You want to do the polar plunge?" "Sure, let's do it." So we go, we do it. And it was cold. And we both agreed it was hard. But all day long, how do we feel? Fantastic.
Yes.
Yeah.
Why?
Yes.
Because it's hard.
Yes.
It's painful. You push. You want to grow? You got to get some pain. So I do the analogy of you take a piece of art, a clay pot, you throw it in a kiln, 2,000 degrees. One or two things happen. It's either going to come out as a beautiful object of art because it's been transformed into a lump of clay with glaze and it's art, or it's going to blow up because there's air bubbles in the clay and it gets destroyed. That's life.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
You're going to end up one way or the other. At the end of our life, what happens? We all die. So let's embrace it. Let's live every day. So, and I give them homework and I push them and I say to them things like, "So if you found out you had a year left to live, what would you change?" And ideally, hopefully people don't change too much. Like, "Oh, I'm pretty happy with my life. Maybe I change this or work less, whatever. I get a bathrobe like Ed." But but there are
I need
things
my
that maybe
cigar
I wouldn't
now.
do.
Yeah.
Ed, a cigar, right?
Yeah. Guys, this was a great show. Jeff, did you have another question?
No, I was just gonna. You talked about acceptance, and there's a paragraph in the big book that one of my counselors told me to read, which changed my life. It's on page 417, and it says, "And acceptance is the answer to all my problems today. When I am disturbed, it is because I found some person, place, thing, or situation, some fact of my life unacceptable to me, and I can find no serenity until I accept that person, place, thing, or situation as being exactly the way it is supposed to be at this moment. Nothing, absolutely nothing happens in God's world by mistake. Until I could accept my alcoholism, I could not stay sober. Unless I accept life completely on life's terms, I cannot be happy. I need to concentrate not so much on what needs to be changed in the world as on what needs to be changed in me and in my attitude."
Acceptance, huh?
Yeah, acceptance.
Good.
And I think it was either you or Sky said one thing to me one time, and I wrote it down. It says, you can't go over it, you can't go under it, you have to go through it.
Very
So,
true.
Yeah.
Sounds like a Skylar comment.
Acceptance was the answer to all my problems.
It is. It is.
So-
Well, I accept that this podcast has been really good. I accept that,
Awesome.
Jeff. I am a true fan of yours. You know that, but you're a dear friend to me. So thank you for
very
coming on the show. We really appreciate it. I hope this clears up a little bit about what the clinical part of step 1 is. If you guys have any more questions, please comment below. Let us know how the show was. What questions you have for Jeff. If you do want to get a hold of Jeff, comment below and we'll get a word out to Jeff and we'll get him. Jeff is an amazing clinician. If you do want to see him, I know he's very tight on time, but I'm sure he'll fit some of the Friends in Recovery in there. But guys, thank you so much, ladies, Tiffany, Sky. Great podcast again. Keep throwing those comments in there, everybody. Make sure you subscribe. That's really important. Send us an email, help@Friends in Recovery Podcast. Let us know if you want to be a guest. Let us know some topics you want to talk about that work around all the steps that we're going through this year. And we'll make sure we get back to you. So on that, guys.
Feel better, Ed. Feel better, Ed. Stay
Thank
safe.
you, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Happy New
I was
Year.
a trooper. I got this whole show in. So
I
but on
know.
that, guys, I
You
want to
did
make
fabulous.
stay sober, everybody.
This concludes this episode of Friends in Recovery, the Addiction Recovery Podcast. Follow us on Facebook for past shows and updates, and enjoy free access to twice daily support meetings. Friends in Recovery, the Addiction Recovery Podcast, is available on Facebook, Podbean, iTunes, and YouTube 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.